It is 11 o'clock, so I am going to start. I want to, first of all, welcome everyone. I'm really happy that you've joined us for our campfire chat today. These chats started in response to our need to get together and share our COVID coping and survival stories over cocktails. Well, my guest today is world-renowned in the field of higher education and institutional advancement, and she's received many international awards for excellence in teaching and leadership. She's also the co-author of The Essential Guide to All Things Planned Giving in Canada, which is available for free to CAGP members, and it's called Planned Giving for Canadians. Now, after 35 years with McMaster University's development team, she now serves as the executive director of the Hamilton's Mohawk College Foundation. So let's meet my drinking partner for today, Lorna Somers.
Oh, Joan, hi. Good to be here again. The marvelous Joan Cosby. Lovely to be here.
Well, thank you. And the big question, the most important question, what are you drinking?
Wow. Thank you for asking. Is it just another typical Thursday at Mohawk? So I have some champagne with me, Joan, but I don't want to be too posh. I also am very happy to go the route of Prosecco and sparkling wine. And I'll tell you why I chose this marvelous drink is because of going into working in England and Australia so much. Nothing starts without bubbles.
Wow.
And the beauty of it is, and I particularly like Prosecco or Asti Spumante, which is the Italian version. It's so versatile, Joan, just like we have to be in our careers, because you can have it in the morning and you put orange juice and you call it a mimosa. You have it in the afternoon, you put peach puree in it and you call it a Bellini. And then before dinner, you call it champers. So it's just one of those things that goes all through the day, just like we have to do with our career. So how about that for a segue?
That's wonderful. That's actually, I'll have to incorporate more of that in my day-to-day living.
Ah, yes.
Now, for me, I'm actually sipping on my morning espresso. Well, it's my coffee of choice, let's say. Now, Lorna, I want to ask you, because you also have some expertise in business and dining etiquette. Am I using the right glass for this?
Absolutely. I always like to have my espresso in a martini glass, Joan. And that's a little lateral thinking and it's creative and that's all good with me. So well done. Let's hope it doesn't shatter in your hand. But well, apart from that, you go, girl.
Okay, but since it's before noon here in Ontario, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour this into my regular coffee glass. And I did that without spilling.
Well done.
There we go. So good morning. There we go.
Morning all. And I'll start with my regular. Bit of bubbly in the morning. No OJ, but there you go.
So Lorna, I'm so excited to have you here today. And when you reflect on your career, I'd like to know what advice you might have for people to help them understand the importance of each individual defining their own, I guess, definition of success.
For sure. And you know what I think, Joan, looking back a little bit, how you define success changes as your career evolves, right? As your family circumstances change, as your interests change and grow. So I think if we create a plan and a definition that is rigid, we do ourselves a disservice. We have to evolve and grow with that definition. So, you know, I always describe this is life and this is work, but work is a big part of this continuum. And I think if you see work as simply a 7-hour interruption or 12-hour or 14 for some of us interruption in your day, then you're not maximizing the opportunity for a more satisfying and gratifying integration. So we have to be really careful about what we think about as success. If we start defining it as what job title I have, how many people report to me, or heaven forbid, just what your salary is, then I think we're shortchanging ourselves and we're in for some disappointment. But if we think more broadly, how much am I getting gratification from my job? Am I adding value? Am I being valued? And if you can answer those questions in the affirmative, I think you're on the way to a great career trajectory. I'm not a big one for looking back. My favorite direction is forward. If I want to look back, I watch Time Team. But if I want to look forward and march forward, I'm in touch with what's right for me at this moment in time and a little bit out there. But down the road, who knows? You have to listen carefully. You have to be open-minded because opportunity often knocks so softly, doesn't it?
It really does. It really does. I like some of the things that you said there, that, you know, your career is actually part of a continuum. And really, you know, as a single mom, when my kids were small, success to me meant having a position that I could meet my financial obligations and not take home my work. It couldn't occupy my headspace because I had to focus on the kids.
Yeah.
But later, I had a situation a couple of years ago when my grandson was critically ill. And in that experience, I found that I really was at the epitome of success for me, because I could take off all the time I needed, knowing I had a team in place here to look after all my clients and my obligations at work. And I also had the financial resources to help out my son and his wife and to get through that trying time. That wouldn't have been possible 30 years ago.
Right. And you wouldn't have defined that as successful 30 years ago either.
Right. Exactly. So yeah, things change over time for sure. So one of the things that I find that oftentimes our success can be a result of walking outside the traditional expectations that are in our careers. And that means taking risks. So Lorna, can you think of a time where you said, this is going to work, or I'm going to get fired?
Well, even my career in this work, which now is in its 36th year, I think, was a big risk, and it was a big gamble and unknown. Some of you will know the story where my husband and I were both in the arts. We're at the Art Gallery of Hamilton in curatorial. And I always say that if you were in the arts in the 80s, you only ate every other night. It was not a lucrative field. It's one you did for love. The fact we were both in it, we were also competing against each other for the same very few jobs. So it was not a great way to start married life, poor and competing with each other for the job. So we flipped a coin, Joan, and the loser had to choose a new field for their career. So we flipped, I lost, and I ended up just as a temporary measure in fundraising at the university. And I thought, as soon as I can, we're on our feet financially, I'll go back into the art world. Well, as it turned out, although I thought I'd lost the coin toss, we both won, because my husband, my late husband, stayed in his role in the arts as a curator, director of a museum and a gallery his entire career and loved it. And I found this work. I found CAGP. I found something that has given me so much satisfaction. So that was my first big risk. So that has tempered all risks going forward. You recalibrate after you do something like that massive career change. So it's always a calculated risk though. So that idea that, wow, I'm going out on a limb here. It's always something I've given a lot of thought to, but sometimes you've got to follow your heart and say, listen, there's an opportunity. This may not seem obvious at first blush, but we risk something greater if we don't try it. And sure, there's going to be people who push back. And trust me, not every idea I've had has been one that has had traction. But at the same time, part of the excitement is working in an environment where you can be bold and you can poke and prod and say, look at, here's another way of looking at that. Here's another lens through which to see an opportunity or a challenge. So the best leader to be and to work with is one who gives you that license, that permission to take risks and sometimes to fail, because we all will and we all do. But to learn from that and to rebound, but never to give up that zeal and energy to say, we can do this better. We can do it more innovatively. We can be more creative. And I think that, to me, that mitigates the sense of taking a risk and going out on a limb, because I've got that permission to try something new and to be a little bit provocative from time to time.
And having the degree of experience that you have, hopefully when we reach that point in our careers that we do get that opportunity to fail, because that is so valuable, the opportunity to try new things. And I know for me, one of the biggest risks that I took was taking on a 4-month temporary position at an international disaster relief agency. It was for a mat leave at the time. And within 2 weeks of starting, a disaster struck in the Dominican Republic, and both the executive director and the relief manager were out of the country. But I felt tremendous pressure to act. Probably because of my own life experiences. But while other people were, sending their thoughts and prayers, I just got busy and I enlisted volunteers to pack 5,000 relief boxes. I called all the churches across and related to the agency across Canada and the US to raise funds for the response. Put together a $500,000 longer term food response. And I had already called DART, which is the Canadian Disaster Assistance Response Team, literally the Army, to deliver that to Dominican Republic. And they said yes. But as it turned out, when the managers came back, they let me know quite clearly that was outside of the usual expectations of our agency. But 4 weeks later, Hurricane Mitch hit, which was a huge storm. And again, the executive director and relief manager were out of the country. And even though I got my knuckles rapped the first time, it was the right thing to do, so I did it again. Except this time it was 10 times bigger, but the risk was worth it, right? So I was offered a full-time position on the disaster relief team, by November. So it's the 3rd month into my 4-month contract, and I was there for about 4 years.
Wow. May I come and work for you? I love that tenacity. I like that, just following what you know is the right thing.
Yeah.
And I think, Joan, too, taking risks doesn't always mean just trying something new. It's also, I think of CAGP, and part of my start was through writing the book you mentioned with Frank Minton, my superhero.
Oh, mine too.
I remember, Marnie Spears, my boss at the time, saying to me, Frank's coming to Canada. I want you to go to his session. And I was like, I don't want to. I'm not interested in that stuff. And she said, not only that, Lorna, I want you to make sure you sit beside him at dinner and get to know him. And once again, I said, but I don't want to. I've got other friends I want to sit beside. And then, when Frank invited me to write the book with him, I was like, but I don't want to. So sometimes you got to do stuff you don't want to do because it's in the best interest of a whole bunch of other things, not just your own career, but the credibility of your organization and the people around you and the profession and your volunteer organizations. So sometimes taking a risk is also stepping up when you don't really want to.
Well, thank you for stepping up. That's all I can say, because you really have put a dent in the landscape of the planned giving world in Canada. And yeah, there's many of us who thank you sincerely for that.
Oh, well, thank you, Joan, and thank you to CAGP. I mean, they took me under their wing when they were first forming, and I got involved at the beginning. And that's the other thing I'd say for your career, Joan. Step up, lean in, go big or go home. Like I was like, okay, I'll do that. I've never led a national conference. I've never been chair of a national board, but I've never been the roundtable chair of our area when it was starting. But I kept sticking my hand up. I'm very bad at auctions. I end up buying a whole lot of stuff I don't really need. But you know, really, and CAGP have been my family through my whole career. And the service back, what I've put in is nothing compared to what I've gotten back. So that is a big part of your career and a big part of that satisfaction piece too, I would say.
Yes, I agree with you 100% there, Lorna. So you've been recognized for many things. One of the things is your leadership skills, and even locally in our Niagara area chapter of the CAGP, there's an award bearing your name that recognizes those leadership skills. But now I'd like to take just a couple of minutes to talk about mentorship. And what are your thoughts about making that relationship work from the perspective of both the mentor and the mentee?
It's a great question, because very often, and you will have experienced this too, after you perhaps make a presentation or have been around a while, people come and say, will you mentor me? And my first reaction in the early days used to be, of course, I'll do whatever I can. But now I'm more circumspect. I'll say, what does that mean? What are you looking for? And get back to me, think about it, and then email me and let's see what we can do together. And you know what, Joan, these are all good people. They're full of ideas and energy. Very few of them ever end up writing back, because I think perhaps the thought is that all of the work will be on me. I will just take you and introduce you to this and share with that and coach you through something else. But it's not that way. It's very much a two-way street. So if you're asking for someone to mentor you, decide if it really needs to be a formal kind of mentor-mentee relationship. And I'm not as big on that as I am on the idea of something that is more ad hoc. I have my sounding boards, my advisory groups that I can pick up the phone to. And sometimes, Joan, they're not even people in our field. They're just other people at arm's length who can look through a very fresh set of eyes to help me think through an opportunity or an issue. So I think mentorship doesn't mean leading and pulling. It's got to be someone who is very clear about what they want out of that relationship. Is it intermittent career advice? Is it the sounding board? Is it I can come to you when something bubbles up that I want help with? Is it sharing with me some of your own personal best practices? So I think we've got to define it in a very bespoke way. So you and I, how I might be mentored by you might be very different than how you would mentor someone else. So it's got to be very tailored, very respectful of each other's time, experience, and bandwidth. And then almost have a covenant between the two of us to say, here is how I'm going to support you, and here is what I expect from you. Because it is a two-way street. And I think a lot of mentees forget that it should be more work on their part than on our part. But I have benefited so much, and I continue to, and I will always have people I turn to as sounding boards and advisors, and who are prepared to slap me up, down, and beyond to say, that is the goofiest thing, Somers, you've ever said, or go for it, you know? So it's a good check and balance to have.
I have to agree that those formal mentor-mentee relationships are, for me, few and far between. I've really only had one where I took on a mentor role for high school students in Hamilton. They were at risk of not making it to graduation. So that was my job, is to help them get their diploma. And that was more of a formal relationship. Now, with one of those students, I actually, 10 years, more than 10 years later, I still have a relationship. And the truth is, I've probably learned more from her about life and working with people and the younger members of society, because they think differently than I do, for sure. But I probably learned more, or at least just as much as she learned from me. Mm-hmm. So it's been a great experience. And so you talk about, career advice and then other personal advice too. So yeah, so what are you looking for when you're talking about, is this job going to fit well with my skills, or do I have the right mindset to take on this responsibility? I'm curious who you talked to before taking on this role at Mohawk College as the ED of the foundation.
My dentist.
Your dentist? See, so you trust him? I don't know. So you got to trust your dentist.
I do spend a lot of time with her. So yeah, no. You know what? First and foremost, I talk with my family. Okay. My daughter is the smarter, kinder, more accomplished woman that I've always wanted to be. So I really started with her. I've known her whole life, and I have admired her for a very long time. And she has a sensibility that is quite extraordinary. And so I chatted with her, and she was like, go for it. It's time to try something new. This is fantastic. And then, since I have a new husband who's relatively new, he's still untested. It's early days. So that's why I went to my daughter first. Just like in the old days, I used to go to my father before I went to my new husband, David, which always ticked him off. But so then I, talked to Perry. He, again, is very steady and calm, sees the best in people, sees the best in the world, and has such a wonderful perspective on what's important in life, and that unconditional support that is so magnificent. And then my little list are the usual suspects. Frank Mitten, of course. He has known me now for well over 30 years. And Marnie Spears, my first boss, who was exceptional and remains a close friend, and I admire her just so much. She's a continuing force for good in my life. My very, very best friend in the world is Joanna Motion, and she lives in England and has worked with universities all over the world. Her expertise is exceptional, her cultural expertise, etc. So she, again, has known me a very long time. And Sue Cunningham is the president and CEO of CASE, which is our international organization for educational institutions. And I've known her for 25 years. So these are all people who know me well. Fritz Schrader, VP of Johns Hopkins in Alumni Development. Again, a 25-year friend. And just touching base, and if there's synchronicity in their responses, they know my idiosyncrasies, they know my strengths, they know my many weaknesses. If I hear from all of them and they say, you go for it, this is fantastic, then I know I'm on the right track. But I've got to say, Joan, I always come back to myself. I've been living with myself for a very long time, since the late Jurassic period. So I kind of know what floats my boat. I know what's right for me. I know I have courage. I know I've got energy. I'm bold. I've got tenacity. And I just want to find joy out of everything I do, whether it's my job, my family, my hobbies, my travel, my teaching. And I am at the stage of life where I am going to extract as much happiness and satisfaction as I can, because the runway's getting shorter. And this is not, as they say, a dress rehearsal. And my work is a big part of it. I'd love to say I've found that perfect balance. I haven't. There are some days where I work, I know, way too long. But at the same time, I'm loving what I do. I'm feeling hugely valued, and I can spread that to the people around me who I'm working with, my other 11 wonderful colleagues here at the foundation. So that's a long answer to a short question, but that's the way I roll.
But it's a great answer. It really is a great answer. And I love that you've mentioned those long-term relationships that, people who know you well, who really have some insight into your habits, good and bad, and your idiosyncrasies, and they can be honest with you, and you're going to love them even when they're brutally honest.
Yeah.
So
it's not as much. Just not as
well, I don't know. After you get over it, then you love them even more because they've steered you in the right direction, right? So, so in my life, I have a few people who I met as teens who we still stay connected with, and then I met this one great friend my first day at Mohawk College as a student in business, and we get together maybe 1, 2, or 3 times a year and talk about our professional and personal lives. And he's been wonderful, provided some great advice, and I like to think that I reciprocated at times too, but it's been great. Now we're getting a little close for time, but there's an important question that I want to ask you. And as you know, I'm a grad of Mohawk's business program, and it's changed my life being in that program and getting through there, and through the help of scholarships as well. I don't think I would have gone through without it. So I'm excited about what potentially you can bring to the greater Hamilton area in this role at Mohawk. So what do you hope to achieve over the next 20 years, Lorna?
Oh, wow. Fantastic. I really am excited to be here. I have always been involved with the college, but more peripherally, and my sister's worked here for 37 years. We clearly are the laziest 2 people in the world staying at institutions for such a long time, but we've loved what we've done. Mohawk is, it's the college sector's moment in the sun. I mean, everything is pointing to a need that I think only the colleges can fulfill. We have an incredible and ambitious president in Ron McCurley, whose passion and authenticity is extraordinary, unparalleled in my experience. So we've got a team of people who are ready to address some big problems within our community. Not necessarily solving the world's big problems. All the universities have been working on that for a long time. They haven't cracked that nut yet. They're a little slow, but still, we have problems in our own community and, in fact, across the country that we can address. My goal in leaving, Joan, when I am saying adieu to Mohawk and retiring to the farm with my chickens and my capybara, is going to be, I want to have left a very high-performing team who are having fun doing what they're doing, feel satisfied, feel valued, know they're adding value, and are just rocking it and setting the gold standard for other teams. I want to not just achieve, but overachieve in terms of all of our goals, financial and otherwise, so that we can show what our sector, our industry can do. And then I want to leave a strong succession plan. I want to not be, oh my gosh, I'd lovely to look back, but rather, wow, we can build on success, because I work with great people, and I know they're going to take the ship to the next destination.
Well, thanks, Lorna, so much for sharing your wisdom here today. And I do have to say that time spent with you is always enlightening, inspiring, and also entertaining. And your wit and charm really does make for a joyful experience.
Oh, thank you.
Now, for those of you enjoying this conversation virtually, the recipes for the drinks are going to be online. And within a few days, you'll be able to watch a replay of this Campfire Chat. And the next Campfire Chat, we're going to have Charlotte Paul and Brad Hoffman, and that is on, let me just check here, and that is on April 13th at 2 p.m. and that's Pacific Standard Time. So keep an eye on your inbox for that registration. And thank you, Lorna, and thank you all for coming today.
Thank you, everyone. Joan, wonderful to be with you again. Thanks.
Thanks, Lorna.